Up to now, the excuse has been that we've got to wait until negotiations are complete. There are no negotiations. All that we have is extremist settlers trying to force out Palestinian people from their villages in the West Bank, which I've seen with my own eyes. In the name of God, why can't we give the Palestinian people some hope?
So maybe he can be the one who surprises me, gets to his feet and says that the plan as laid out by Benjamin Netanyahu is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Will he do that, yes or no?
We now learn from a government minister, an Israeli government minister, that Gaza is to be entirely destroyed, and we're watching the live streaming starvation of an entire people. Now, the minister talks about his anguish, and I know it's genuine, but can he not see what the majority of the House can see, that he's facing a catastrophic failure of government policy?
In the past year, 100,000 tonnes of bombs have been dropped on Gaza, the equivalent of 5 times of the power of the nuclear weapons used over Hiroshima and Nagasaki 80 years ago. That's resulted in the death of at least 60,000 people. And on top of that, we're now going to have the complete invasion of Gaza by Israel. At what point will the government actually cease all arms supplies and military cooperation with Israel, cease the use of RAF Akrotiri, and above all, stop the export of any parts for F-35 jets, which have been complicit in the killing of 60,000 people in Gaza?
Statement, Minister Hamish Falconer.
With your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll make a statement on the Middle East. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved a plan to expand and intensify Israel's military operations in Gaza. He said that the Israeli Defense Force operations will extend across more of Gaza. Tactics will no longer involve short raids, with the implication that Israel will hold the ground it takes. Reports suggest that the plans could include full military occupation of the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Gaza's population will be moved for its protection. Tens of thousands of reservists are being called up. In parallel, the Security Cabinet reportedly approved a plan to deliver aid through private companies. This comes at a time, Madam Deputy Speaker, when the scale of civilian suffering and humanitarian need is already intolerable. More than 52,000 people have now been killed in Gaza. Israel has fully blocked the entry of humanitarian aid for over 2 months. The World Food Programme says their food stockpile has been exhausted. These announcements from the Israeli government have rightly sparked grave concern that this conflict, which has already wrought so much bloodshed and suffering, may enter a dangerous new phase. I know that concern will be felt right across the House. Let me make the government position crystal clear. We strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's operations. Any attempt to annex land in Gaza would be unacceptable. Palestinian territory must not be reduced nor subjected to any demographic change. We want this war to end. We want an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, the urgent provision of humanitarian aid, and a pathway to a political solution. Madam Deputy Speaker, all of us recognise that Hamas continues to hold hostages in the cruelest fashion. Their actions show the complete disregard for the interests of the Palestinian people. Hamas must not divert aid for their own financial gain or use civilian infrastructure for military purposes. We repeat our demand for the immediate release of the hostages. But an expansion of this conflict is not the route to achieve their safe return. That is why it is so strongly opposed by so many hostage families themselves. It is negotiations which offer the best hope of ending the agony of those waiting for loved ones held captive, alleviating the suffering of civilians, and ending Hamas's control of Gaza. It is evident that Hamas cannot be defeated through military means alone. An expansion of military operations will result in the deaths of more innocent civilians and put the hostages at yet greater risk. The fighting must stop. The government has said since day one in office that the only way to ensure a path towards long-term peace and stability is an immediate ceasefire, the release of hostages, better protection of civilians, and significantly more aid entering Gaza. Diplomacy is how we ensure security for Israelis and Palestinians, not more bloodshed. All the people of this region deserve to live in peace, prosperity, and security. We urge all parties to return urgently to talks, implement the ceasefire agreement in full, and work towards a permanent peace. We continue to use our full diplomatic weight to bring about a ceasefire and end the suffering. After more than 2 months of aid into Gaza being blocked, Palestinians continue to face immense suffering. Essential supplies of food and medicine are either no longer available or quickly running out. As the United Nations has already said, it is hard to see how, if implemented, the new Israeli plan to deliver aid through private companies would be consistent with humanitarian principles and meet the scale of the need. We need urgent clarity from the Israeli government on their intentions. We must remember what is at stake. These humanitarian principles matter for every conflict around the world. They should be applied consistently in every war zone. As we have said repeatedly, humanitarian aid must never be used as a political tool, and Israel is bound under international law to allow the unhindered passage of humanitarian aid. I repeat my call for Israel to engage with partners to allow for a rapid and unhindered resurgence of the flow of aid into Gaza. We reiterate our outrage at recent strikes by Israeli forces on humanitarian workers, on infrastructure and healthcare facilities. Israel must do far more to protect the civilian population and humanitarian workers, and hold to account those who are responsible. Over a year since the appalling attack on the World Central Kitchen, in which 3 British nationals were tragically killed, we continue to press for a conclusion to the Israeli investigation and a decision as to whether criminal proceedings will be brought. The UN and humanitarian partners must be able to carry out their work in safety in accordance with their principles. Madam Deputy Speaker, last week we welcomed Prime Minister Mustafa of the Palestinian Authority to the United Kingdom. We signed a landmark Memorandum of Understanding and confirmed a £101 million package of support to the occupied Palestinian territories. We will continue to support the Palestinian Authority as the only legitimate governing entity in the occupied Palestinian territories, including in Gaza. During that visit, we reaffirmed the UK's commitment to recognising a Palestinian state as a contribution to a two-state solution. It is only a political horizon towards a two-state solution that can ensure the long-term peace and security of both Palestinians and Israelis. I commend the statement to the House.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I agree with the Minister's comments and condemnation of Israel's actions in Gaza. The problem is that I've agreed with him every time he's made these commendations of Israel, and the whole House generally has joined him in that. The reality is that Israel's taken absolutely no notice of the government's position on this. What we're seeing now with the actions in Gaza, the starving of the population, the threats to wholesale movement of that population away, are completely unacceptable. So will the Minister consider 2 things now? First of all, a rapid recognition of a Palestinian state, hopefully together with France and other allies. And secondly, to seriously consider sanctions against Israel if they pursue the wholesale removal of Palestinians from their homes.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know the strength of feeling from my honourable friends, from so many on the benches behind me, and indeed right across the House. It is obviously a source of great anguish to me and all in the government that we continue this far into our government to still not have the ceasefire in place that we have long called for. We are working with our allies in order to try to persuade Israel to change course. As he will know, I won't comment on sanctions from this dispatch box, but we have been clear as we can on our position, both in relation to the many areas where we have discussed in this House week after week and month after month a failure to see improvement, whether that's in relation to the protection of civilians or aid into Gaza. And we will, of course, continue to discuss all other matters in relation to this fraught and tragic situation with our close partners, as he would expect.
I call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Monica Harding.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Israeli government's decision to approve plans for an expanded offensive, summarised by officials as the conquest of Gaza, is disgraceful. It will wreak more devastation and displacement on Palestinians after months of bombardment. It will also narrow the path back to a ceasefire, while severely harming the chances of getting the remaining hostages in Hamas's captivity back to Israel alive. Does the Minister agree with me that if the Israeli government carries out its threat to seize and hold Gaza, this would constitute a further flagrant breach of international law? And in that instance, can the Minister outline what this government's response would be? The latest aid blockade of Gaza has now reached over 60 days. The UN has described it as a growing humanitarian catastrophe. Prime Minister Netanyahu's latest proposals to deliver aid through private companies at military hubs would appear to contravene basic principles of international humanitarian law, including the neutrality of aid, and have been criticised by aid organisations as dangerous and unworkable. The Israeli government's refusal to reopen aid routes is utterly unacceptable and contravenes its obligations as an occupying power. We've welcomed the government's pledge of a £101 million package of support for the occupied Palestinian territories. Without more action to secure the reopening of aid pathways, however, this new package will provide limited relief for Palestinians suffering in the Strip. Can the Minister provide details on how the government is working with international partners to pressure the Israeli government to allow the aid to reach Gaza? And can the Minister also update the House on whether contingency measures are being considered to ensure aid reaches those suffering in Gaza, even if Israeli government continues to block the direct supply of aid into the Strip?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady asks a series of important questions. I sought in my statement to very clearly focus on what has been announced by the Israeli government, including by Prime Minister Netanyahu on Sunday. I don't wish to be drawn into speculation about the various reports of how this operation may be conducted, but stick only to the public announcements. We have been clear, as the Honourable Lady will know, all the way along, both in our commitment to a ceasefire, our desire to return to the framework of the ceasefire that was negotiated with such relief. We are in regular touch with Special Envoy Witkoff. We hope that in his efforts he will be able to secure a return to a ceasefire. That would be far preferable on all of the axes that she describes, whether that's the safe return of hostages, the desperate need for humanitarian aid to return to Gaza, or indeed, in our view, Israel's security itself. She asks important questions too about the role of an occupying power in the provision of aid. My officials set our view on the legal position out on Friday at the International Court of Justice.
Marcia de Cordova.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was clearly eager to come in. The Israeli government's plan to expand its military operation in Gaza and displace its population speaks volumes about the effects of their impunity. Impunity to break international law, to cut off food and medical supplies, to starve a population, to kill tens of thousands of civilians. And I suppose my question to the Minister really is, what will he be doing to end Israel's impunity in terms of the way they are acting, and when will he finally act to sanction those Israeli ministers, apply a full arms embargo, ban all settlement goods, and most importantly, to recognise Palestine?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her important questions. So I've set out at this dispatch box the steps that we have taken, whether it's in relation to sanctions or arms or goods, and I won't rehearse them here. I can see that there are many who want to contribute. And as you would expect, I won't comment on further sanctions. She asks the question which I know is on the lips of so many in this House about recognition. What we see in Gaza, the announcements that we have seen over the weekend, obviously is a very, very significant, immediate and practical threat to the viability of Palestinian life. And we are taking every practical step that we can alongside our allies to try and focus on the ceasefire that must be our most immediate priority, given the threats that hang over such a significant civilian population as we speak.
Sir Edward Lee.
In his statement, the Minister said that we, the UK government, reaffirm our commitment to recognising a Palestinian state. Up to now, the excuse has been that we've got to wait until negotiations are complete. There are no negotiations. All that we have is extremist settlers trying to force out Palestinian people from their villages in the West Bank, which I've seen with my own eyes. In the name of God, why can't we give the Palestinian people some hope? Why can't we give them the same right to self-determination and recognise a Palestinian state now?
Minister.
I thank the right honourable gentleman and my neighbour for his commitment to these issues. The problems that face the Palestinian people at this moment are acute, immediate, and they are practical. And as I set out at this dispatch box last week, we stand by our commitments, as I mentioned in the statement. We want to make a contribution to practically improving the lives of the Palestinian people, and we will view recognition in that light.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. No one can deny any longer that Israel is committing war crime after war crime. Over 50,000 Palestinians killed, millions forcibly displaced, the complete blockade of Gaza for the last 2 months, and now plans to annex the entirety of the Gaza Strip. Madam Deputy Speaker, just what will it take for the government to properly act over Netanyahu's breaking of every single international norm and rule? And I say to the Minister, simply opposing the expansion of military operations from the dispatch box is not securing peace or helping the Palestinian people. The government has rightly imposed widespread sanctions on Russia. Why does it refuse to impose widespread sanctions on Israel?
Minister.
I recognise the passion in my honourable friend's voice. As he knows, it is not just at this dispatch box that we have set out our views, and he asks for widespread sanctions. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, as the House knows, we have imposed sanctions on violent settlers. We have suspended arms licences according to a careful process, looking at the risks of international humanitarian law. We will continue to take action across the full range of our diplomatic options, not just at this dispatch box, as he would expect.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What dialogue is ongoing with Egypt at this time? Because I think there are concerns about the pressures on Egypt, not just from the situation in Gaza and their obvious interest in the Rafah crossing, but with the pressures in the south from the conflict in Sudan. Egypt remains a very important party in getting to a resolution. And what is the government's current dialogue and support for Egypt?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his important question. Of course, this conflict affects not just Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, but many of its neighbours, including Egypt, and I can confirm that the government has been in regular dialogue with Egyptian counterparts, and I myself have an upcoming exchange with one of my Egyptian counterparts on exactly these questions.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people of Gaza are being starved deliberately. They need full, immediate, unimpeded delivery of adequate aid. So will the UK government insist that Israel ensures that aid is distributed not by private military contractors, but by the UN and international agencies according to the UN's recognised humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, independence and impartiality?
Minister.
My honourable friend rightly highlights the importance of the humanitarian principles she outlines. They are important principles not just in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, but right across the world. It is a proud part of British history that we have been such forceful advocates for those principles, and we will continue to be so with Israel and any others who seeks to undermine them.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister will forgive me, but there is few things more infuriating in this House than listening to ministers when they're of the blue persuasion or now the red persuasion fail to call out collective punishment for what it is, fail to call out war crimes for what they are, continue to justify the sale of arms to Israel, and find every excuse possible not to recognise the State of Palestine. So maybe he can be the one who surprises me, gets to his feet and says that the plan as laid out by Benjamin Netanyahu is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Will he do that, yes or no?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman from the SNP, perhaps unsurprisingly, goes for rhetoric. He wants me to opine on questions of law and make determinations which ministers for a long time have rightly chosen to treat as questions for the courts. He asked me to take action. As a government, the Labour Party has taken action. They've taken action on arms. They've taken actions on sanctions. We have a record which we can defend. We are not simply here for rhetoric.
Matthew Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Not a week goes by without more worrying news coming out of the Middle East. My thoughts are with the innocent people in Gaza worried about a new offensive, with the hostage families worried about their loved ones, and with Israel following the Houthi attack. I would like to ask whether the Minister would like to join me in condemning the Houthi attack and also calling for negotiations to continue that sees aid get into Gaza and hostages returned home.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question, and I know his long personal commitment to those so badly affected by this conflict. I do join him in condemnation of the Houthi attack. This House should be under no illusions about the nature of the Houthis. They are no friends to the Palestinians. Their action in their repeated strikes against international shipping and practically any flagged vessel that crosses through the Red Sea is a threat to global peace and security. It's a threat to international trade, and their actions targeting civilian aviation does nothing for the Palestinian people.
Kit Malthouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, after 18 months of the diplomacy that the Minister's referred to, it's clear that Israel has not significantly complied once. Now, after watching children being shot in the streets, medics and hospitals consistently targeted, British citizens and rescue workers murdered and their bodies concealed, red lines such as Rafah reduced to rubble, and of course the hostages still in captivity. We now learn from a government minister, an Israeli government minister, that Gaza is to be entirely destroyed, and we're watching the live streaming starvation of an entire people. Now, the Minister talks about his anguish, and I know it's genuine, but can he not see what the majority of the House can see, that he's facing a catastrophic failure of government policy, for which the Palestinians and the Israelis and the rest of us may well pay a heavy price for many years to come? He's an intelligent man. Can he not see the moral and tactical case for a change in strategy that might bring about peace?
Minister.
The right honourable gentleman talks powerfully, and the scenes in Gaza are visible to us all. He asks about questions of tactics and strategy. The right strategy must be, over the next 2 weeks, for Special Envoy Witkoff's efforts to see success. We need to see a ceasefire restored. It is those who are advocating for that political process that need our full support, and that is where the efforts of the government are focused.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Israeli Government Minister Smotrich said today that Gaza is to be entirely destroyed and its people to leave in great numbers to third countries. This latest threat, on top of the deliberate blockage of aid into Gaza, on top of the ongoing displacement of the past 18 months, on top of 50,000 deaths. There are clearly breaches of international humanitarian law. The Minister has been clear in his condemnation. He has been clear that this is not the way to bring the hostages home. But if the Israeli government is not listening to his words, and surely they are not, will he consider what meaningful action the government can take? Will he consider further sanctions against Israeli government ministers and against the goods that are made in his illegal settlements on stolen Palestinian land?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the important question. Clearly, the rhetoric of some Israeli government ministers has crossed a threshold in which we would all condemn, and the Foreign Secretary has condemned a series of statements, and I wasn't familiar with this one, but it looks like it would fall very much in the same category. As you would expect, I will not comment on further sanctions. We have, as I've been clear already this afternoon, we have taken action, and we will keep further action under review.
Sir Desmond Swain.
The Minister has made the government's position crystal clear that the Israeli plan is unacceptable. How will British government policy towards Israel change as that plan is implemented?
Minister.
We hope, as the right honourable gentleman will know, we hope to avoid having to deal with that hypothetical. We will seek to persuade the Israeli government not to embark on a path so damaging for all of the reasons that I've set out this afternoon. But I'm sure he will be asking me this question in the House, should we fail.
Andrew Pakes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yet again, the unimaginable horror of what is happening in Gaza has been joined up by yet more unacceptable behaviour from the Israeli government. And let me be clear for the House, the butchers of Hamas could draw this to an end today by the release of the hostages, but that does not make right the starvation and destruction of the Palestinian people in Gaza. A dictionary definition of ethnic cleansing includes the mass expulsion of a people from their land. So can I ask the Minister two questions? Firstly, what does he think when he hears Israeli ministers saying, I quote, "We are finally going to occupy the Gaza Strip. Once we occupy, we can start to talk about sovereignty." How does he feel? And secondly, those of us on this side of the House stood on a manifesto to recognise the State of Palestine. Can I ask the Minister, if not now, when?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend who has a deep commitment to these issues, who raises them here and elsewhere often. Let me be clear. Any attempt to annex land in Gaza would be unacceptable. Palestinian territory must not be reduced nor subjected to any demographic change. My honourable friend can read from that the strength of our views on some of the announcements that have been made by some of those associated with the Israeli government. We want to see a Palestinian state which can function safely side by side with a safe Israeli state. It is regrettable that that seems like such a distant prospect, and I'm sure we will be continuing this discussion in this House in the weeks and months to come.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In light of this latest outrage from the Netanyahu government to displace hundreds of thousands of innocent Palestinians, on top of starvation of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, on top of the murdering of aid workers, on top of the expansion of violence by settlers, we get from the Minister strong opposition, a request for urgent clarity, a reiteration of his outrage. He says he's taking action, but he can hear from all sides of the House nobody is satisfied with the level of action the British government is taking. So I implore him again, listen to the support from all sides of the House, recognise a Palestinian state, impose a full arms embargo on Israel, sanction Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and in the name of God, as others have said, please can we get aid into Gaza so that people will stop starving? Minister.
The Honourable Lady is right to press on the absolute vital importance of aid getting into Gaza. These are points that we make regularly with force with the Israeli government, and part of my anguish is the reports that I read, like so many in the House do, of the continued failure for that to happen. I want to address a point which I think the Honourable Lady may have been making, which others have made too, about whether there are alternative routes to get aid into Gaza. A range of alternative routes other than through the land crossing have been tried. It is the view of the British government that no route other than a land route can get the scale of aid into Gaza that is now required. And it is Israeli decision-making that is preventing those land routes from being in operation. She asks about recognition of a Palestinian state, and I refer her to my previous answers.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend today for his statement following yet another appalling turn of events towards Gaza by this Israeli government. In a Westminster Hall debate in February, I said that I feared if the occupation continued, it would become increasingly difficult to apply international law to the situation on the ground. Now I fear that if we do not recognise a Palestinian state, there will be no Palestinian state that includes Gaza left to be recognised. Will the UK government now take immediate steps to recognise the state of Palestine?
Minister.
We are clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the principles of international law that apply. As I said to the Right Honourable Lady opposite, we on Friday appeared at the International Court of Justice to set out our understanding of the obligations on an occupying power, in this case Israel, and were clear about what international law, in our view, meant for the occupying power.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we've heard, the Netanyahu cabinet has now approved an illegal plan to expand its military offensive to capture and occupy all of Gaza. This will put 1 million children at acute risk of starvation, epidemic disease and death, with the deliberate blockade of food and essential supplies. Does the Minister deny that this constitutes genocide in real time, and when did he last assess the real risk that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the House knows, I will not make a determination from this ballot box on questions of law. We do assess risk, and I can confirm that those assessments are ongoing, and a prevention of humanitarian aid reaching Gaza is part of those assessments.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we approach the anniversary of the ICJ advisory opinion on the occupation, what is delaying the UK government's response? Is it that the opinion requires not just recognition that the occupation is illegal, but for the government to set out what steps it will take to end that occupation? Would he at least say from the dispatch box today whether the government believes that the movement of the Palestinian population of Gaza would constitute forcible displacement?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend for the question. Of course, forcible movement of the Gazan population out of Gaza would be forcible displacement, and that is a clear concept in international law.
Mark Pritchard.
Deputy Speaker, of course Israel is an important security, trade and democratic partner, but that doesn't give it a blank cheque. The fact is that 13,000 children have been killed, 25,000 have been injured, maimed, wounded, orphaned, some of them. And for many years, I've been in this House 20 years, I have supported Israel pretty much at all costs, quite frankly. But today, I want to say that I got it wrong. And I condemn Israel for what it is doing to the Palestinian people in Gaza and indeed in the West Bank. And I'd like to withdraw my support right now for the actions of Israel, what they are doing right now in Gaza. Of course the hostages should be released. Of course that Israel has the right to exist. Of course the Israeli people, the Jewish people should have the right to live in peace, but so do the Palestinian people. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, that the life of a Palestinian child is as precious as the life of a Jewish child. And this is this particular moment in time, we've had lots of statements over the last 18 months, this is not only this Parliament's not greatest hour. I'm really concerned that this is a moment in history when people look back where we've got it wrong as a country. Yeah. Can the Minister stand up to our friends and allies in the United States and make a strong stand for humanity, for us being on the right side of history, for having the moral courage to lead, not just to follow the United States, and to make a difference? That's why we're all elected here. Let's stand up for life. Let's stand up for all children, not just Jewish children.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, that was a very powerful intervention, and I won't linger long in the answer other than to say I hear his words and I feel their force, and I will, of course, endeavour to stand up on the international stage and here in this dispatch box equal to the strength of some of these contributions.
Yasmin Qureshi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam, we've been hearing throughout this afternoon all the things that's been happening in Gaza committed by Israel. The truth of the matter is Israel's cold-blooded murder of medics, of civilians, of UN staff, and even the aid flotilla in international waters, which killed many aid workers. And in the West Bank, more than 500,000 illegal settlements, illegal violent settlers using force, backed by the IDF and the Israelis, have been killing and maiming people in West Bank as well. Does that show that actions of Israel have been all about occupying Gaza, occupying West Bank, and continuing with their feeling, which the cabinet ministers have been saying, Israelis, that basically they want to full Judea and Samaria, and they're not even going to stop at Gaza or West Bank, but they're going to continue.
Before I bring in the Minister, could I ask members and indeed the Minister just to make the questions and answers a little bit shorter? Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and let me restate the British Government's position in relation to both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They would be we hope that they will be a vital part, both territories, of a single Palestinian state, and that is the objective to which we strive.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the past year, 100,000 tonnes of bombs have been dropped on Gaza, the equivalent of 5 times of the power of the nuclear weapons used over Hiroshima and Nagasaki 80 years ago. That's resulted in the death of at least 60,000 people. And on top of that, we're now going to have the complete invasion of Gaza by Israel. At what point will the government actually cease all arms supplies and military cooperation with Israel, cease the use of RAF Akrotiri, and above all, stop the export of any parts for F-35 jets, which have been complicit in the killing of 60,000 people in Gaza. This surely is a time for the British government to say no, no more, no weapons, no cooperation, no support to save lives in Gaza and, of course, in the West Bank. Now is the time to say and do that.
Hear, hear.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out the position in relation to the carve-out for F-35 components. Just to be clear to the House, we have suspended the sale of F-35 parts where they go directly to Israel. It is only in a position where we do not know their final destination that they are not suspended. And I won't rehearse the recognition points given the pressures of time.
Paul Wall.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let's be clear, the master murderers of Hamas could end the suffering of the Gazan people today if they release the hostages and they agree to a ceasefire. But let's also be clear that this extremist Israeli government, in its own actions in the last few days and the last few weeks, is endangering the state of Israel. As the Right Honourable Member for the Wrekin has just made absolutely clear, he's undermining the state of Israel by its actions more than any Hamas extremist could ever dream of. So does the Minister agree with me? And he talks about practical measures, he talks about pragmatism rather than symbolism. I agree with him. But isn't the most practical step this country could take to recognise the State of Palestine in conjunction with other states as soon as possible in order to move the peace process on?
I can assure my honourable friend that we do want to move this process on towards a political horizon, towards a peaceful solution, as quickly as we possibly can.
Dr. Andrew Mirison.
Deputy Speaker, I've been in the Minister's shoes and I do sympathise with him as he grapples with an extremely complicated and fraught situation. But does he agree with me that there cannot be any sustainable peace in the region or a viable Palestine without dealing with Hamas? And if so, what will be his plan to achieve that with others beyond pious rhetoric and hand-wringing?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman is knowledgeable and experienced his right to focus on the central importance of removing Hamas from any position in Gaza where they could pose a threat both to the Palestinian people and indeed the Israeli civilians who have suffered so terribly at their hands. The answer is to remove Hamas and have the Palestinian Authority return in their rightful place as the sole legitimate governing authority for both the West Bank and Gaza.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. An Israeli human rights group has now described Israel as using starvation as a method of warfare. This is a war crime under Article 54 of the Geneva Convention. So will he join Ireland, South Africa and many others in clarifying a genocide and apartheid against the people of Palestine? It is time to speak up and out and speak for Palestine.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't rehearse the points I've already made about determinations of genocide and indeed on recognition.
Rachel Hopkins. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Israeli government's plans to expand its military offensive in Gaza, including holding ground and moving the Palestinian population into the south of the Strip, is wholly unacceptable. It's a clear act of aggression and flies in the face of international law. I do welcome the Minister's statement that this government strongly condemns Israel's actions, but does he, accept from voices across the House that the recognition of Palestine as a state would be imperative to work towards a lasting peace?
Minister.
I do agree with my honourable friends that a Palestinian state, safe and secure alongside its neighbour, a safe and secure Israeli state, is going to, in the end, be the vital component of sustainable peace in the region.
Chris Law.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Gaza will be entirely destroyed. That's a direct quote from Israel's Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, earlier today. This is the language of ethnic cleansing and genocide. This is a pariah government that's using starvation as a weapon of war. Warnings the Israeli government will seek to displace the entire Palestinian population and flatten all of Gaza have been repeatedly ignored by this government over many months, yet this is now the reality that Gazans face. So given the UK government has continued to give continued support to Israel throughout this conflict, with reports an RAF jet flew to Israel with F-35 parts and military personnel only just last week, is it the case the British intelligence services and the Foreign Office have been blindsided by Israel's approved plan?
Minister.
If the honourable gentleman means, was the Foreign Office aware of the plan before it was announced? No, we were not aware that the plan, and we have been clear in all of our interactions since we have become this government on the view we would take on proposals of this nature.
Nadia Whittam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For more than a year and a half, we've witnessed a genocide being live-streamed on our screens. We've seen children in Gaza being blown apart by Israeli bombs, infants wasting away from Israel's imposed starvation, and now Israel is proposing a full invasion and occupation of the entire Strip. The Israeli government is making a mockery of international law, and we are enabling it. It's not enough for the UK government just to condemn the Israeli government. When will our government end all arms sales to Israel and implement trade sanctions? We cannot be asking in years to come, what did we do to prevent a genocide, and for the answer to be not enough.
I thank my honourable friends for the question. I won't rehearse the F-35 points discussed with the right honourable member for Islington North. I want to return to her points about international law. This government will continue to stand for international law, as we did on Friday at the ICJ, where we were absolutely clear on our position on international law as it pertains to the occupying power, which is what Israel finds itself as in Gaza.
Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. From the father of the House to the 2024 intake, we are hearing across the chamber from Labour, Conservative, from Green, Plaid, Scottish National colleagues, a consensus of what the government need to do on behalf of the British people. We need our government to recognise the Palestinian state. We need to make sure that the hostages are returned home. We need to stop the killing of innocent Palestinians who are now faced with starvation. Minister, on behalf of this House of Commons, I plead with you and the government to take action. Sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, the Minister. That we plead with the Minister and the government to take action on behalf of all of us as honourable members in this House, and to do the right thing and show that leadership. We are capable of leadership. We need to act.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I would say I've been at this dispatch box on many occasions discussing these issues, but I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that I have felt the force of the contributions this afternoon.
Jessica Morton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for coming to the House this afternoon to give this update and his strong opposition to the proposed expansion of Israel's military operation. Constituents and we all continue to be horrified by the consequences of the assault on Gaza, the blockade on aid, and now the news this weekend of escalation. And they ask, if diplomacy is failing, then what comes next? What more can the Minister state to my constituents about the latest negotiations? And can I join others from across the House in the call for meaningful action, including recognition?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. We are fully committed to playing our full diplomatic role. I hear the frustrations of her constituents and indeed hear it from my own constituents in Lincoln. I know that many across the country watch these scenes in growing horror that they continue this long into the conflict. We will be working, including with our European partners, particularly France and Germany. We have issued E3 statements together. It is a source of shared frustration that more progress has not been made. We hope, as I said in an earlier answer, to be able to see progress towards a ceasefire We are supporting the efforts of Special Envoy Witkoff in that regard, and we will spare no effort in that.
Adnan Hussain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, over and over again, from all sides of this House, we witness grandstanding against mass migration and the most vulnerable in any society, refugees and asylum seekers, whilst knowing all too well that refugee crises are not born out of a vacuum, as attested by the situation unfolding before the eyes of the world in Gaza. Refugees have no choice. They are forced out of their homes and thrust upon the world looking for somewhere safe to seek asylum. And after last week's elections, the Prime Minister...
I'm sure the Honourable Gentleman is going to get to his question very quickly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After last week's election, the Prime Minister pledged to the British public that he will go harder on the issue of migration. And now, given what the Israeli government is saying, I ask the Minister whether the government will go harder, whether his government will come down hard in action and not mere condemnation to ensure that the world is not faced with a new and devastating refugee crisis.
Minister.
As the Honourable Gentleman knows, one of the most painful elements of this crisis has been that even those Palestinians in Gaza who wish to leave have not been able to do so. We've discussed forced displacement regrettably many times already over the course of this afternoon, so I won't rehearse the point, but I can assure him that in the face of potential further escalation in the conflict, we will redouble our efforts to try to secure the ceasefire that I know everybody in this House wants to see restored.
I am going to get all members in, but can I please urge short questions? Ian Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Minister, Israel is starving Gaza to death. When Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war and Palestinians are being ethnically cleansed before our eyes, sorry, Minister, mere words of regret or condemnation from the government simply are not good enough. We will be judged by in history for the failure of the Palestinian people in this House. So I urge the Minister to listen to the House today, the consensus that's being built, and act. Act, not words. Please, Minister, we need actions for the Palestinian people.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've heard the force of the contributions. I'd say gently to my honourable friend that unlike my predecessors, I have taken action, as has the Foreign Secretary and others, in response to this crisis. But clearly, in the face of the scenes coming out of Gaza, no one can be claiming victory at the moment.
Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his statement and for his careful chosen words as well. It's never easy to respond to all the questions. As the Minister is aware and has stated, peace talks must be a priority for the region, and the need for food and aid to reach children is absolutely essential. Yeah. So has the Minister been able to talk with our allies in Israel to allow independent third parties immediate access to Gaza to distribute needed supplies, whilst also, very important, also ensuring that Israel's safety is not in any way compromised?
The Honourable Gentleman talks about the importance of independence and impartiality. Those are exactly the principles that should be guiding the humanitarian operation in Gaza. He is absolutely right. Hamas must not be diverting aid for their own financial gain or using civilian infrastructure for military purposes. The best way to ensure that is to open up Gaza and allow the aid agencies in to operate effectively.
Mohammed Yassin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, given that the Israeli government has publicly declared its intent to occupy Gaza indefinitely and is systematically denying its entire population access to the most basic needs to sustain human survival, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a war crime. So does the Minister agree with me that the UK government must urgently recognise the State of Palestine alongside France at the United Nations Conference on the two-state solution in June?
Minister.
I can reassure my honourable friends that we want to play our full contribution in moving a two-state solution forward, and we're of course in touch with all key regional partners in the run-up to the June conference.